right, ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the only coast-to-coast show all about the information economy. It's time for Inside Analysis. Yours truly, Eric Kavanaugh, here in Amsterdam with the Dutch. And I'm sitting here with a real innovator, a guy named Dominic Cugini from Key Bank. And he gave a keynote yesterday at the One conference. We're here with the folks from OutSystems. Low-code platform is what they say. It's low-code to pro-code, I think, to be completely candid. But Dominic, you gave such an interesting talk yesterday about how you lead the transformation team at Key Bank, and you've got about 100 people in your team, and you kind of move them around, right? You have 5 people who
Correct.
report to you, and then you have a whole bunch of other folks. Tell us about the team, who's on the team, and how do you get them to do cool stuff?
Yeah. So as I formed this team a few years ago, I really thought about the how we need to help the businesses thrive.
Yeah.
Right. And with that, you have to look at kind of a SWOT analysis, so to speak, of what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses. And I found out at times that the weaknesses is when you work in an area for a long period of time, you kind of get in a rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
That rhythm could be a good rhythm, it could be a bad rhythm,
Right.
but you don't know sometimes because you're in the rhythm, you're in
Right.
that cycle. So it's good to interject outside eyes looking at your process, your business, to say and give you a different lens. What might you be missing?
Yeah.
Are you thinking client-centric in a new way,
Mm-hmm.
or kind of a way that may be 3 or 4 or 5 years old? As we know, our environment moves at such a fast-paced change. I don't even talk in 3 to 5 year strategies anymore.
Wow.
I talk in 1 to 2, because
Wow.
by the 3rd year,
Right.
you're
Things
most
have
likely
changed.
pivoting. So why spend the time on what that 3rd year is going to be?
Right.
Because it's so hypothetical and most likely wrong in
Right.
this instance, right? So I don't spend a lot of time into that 3rd year. You focus on kind of that 24-month plan anymore, versus we used to talk in business, what's your 5-year plan?
Right.
And you used to actually execute a 5-year plan.
Right.
Things are moving too fast for that these days. So I set up a team of transformation specialists. So I have 5 transformation leads that report to me, and I have a team of roughly 40 process engineers and analysts. And what we do is we set them up with each of the squad leaders, and based on key strategy, maybe a business problem that we're trying to solve, an area where we want to grow revenue, or we want to better understand our operating efficiency, we get assigned into those areas. So we work closely with the CFO, the CRO, and across Key, as well as the CIO, to figure out and stack rank which are the areas we should really go and look at. And we'll assemble a squad to go into that area, and we can spend anywhere from a month to 3 months really starting to understand that business. What is the business problem they're trying to solve? And one of the things we do differently is I don't just go in there and say, okay, Eric, you're trying to solve this. Okay, let me help you solve that. I want to make sure you're solving the right problem.
Oh, yeah.
So I want to understand, what is your true north for your business?
Interesting.
What problem do you think you're trying to solve?
Yeah.
And then I always go in, maybe not always best, for the business, how they like it, but I always go in and say, okay, I'm going to play devil's advocate that you're not trying to solve the right problem. Because
Right.
it puts us in a different
Yeah.
mindset,
Sure.
right, to go in there. If we just believe this is right, we have tunnel vision, and we go fix that problem, right, wrong, or indifferent. So we have
Right.
to go in playing devil's advocate the whole time. We want to become part of that team, so it's not another team doing something unto you. So
Sure.
we try to get really close with the team. For our Key Private Bank, for example, we did over 100 interviews before we even started to kind of come up with our hypotheses.
Right.
We'll work with different vendors to get outside information to see what are our competitors doing, because we're not always experts in a space we go into.
Yeah.
Which is actually a good thing, because we don't have that tunnel vision.
Right.
You can kind of come in with a younger mind, ask why,
Yeah.
ask what.
Yeah.
All right, as you go into that. So it helps us really get a different lens of what the business is trying to do, challenging them. Are they in the right channels? Are they thinking of the client, not only our current client base, but what we see as the future client base, and talking about something like wealth or mortgage, the way people want to interact, the way our competitors are changing. Are we doing the right things from a business architecture and a tech architecture to keep up?
That's great.
So we really try to think about that. We always end in a business case of, here's what we recommend. We don't boil the ocean. So we come up again with here's a 12-month to 24-month plan that we see. Here's what we think you should do first. Maybe it's not all. We'll put that on a backlog.
Right.
But here's what we think we could bite off, because you also have to think of the people change.
Right.
Through that.
Right.
People can only, our clients as well as our employees, can only change so fast.
Yeah.
So that's where I think sometimes executives get a little overly aggressive and I want to do all this.
Right.
And they see it as a time and money problem.
Right.
We don't always think about how fast or how quickly can you bring the team along with a
Right.
change, and how many changes can you hit them with.
Well, and this is such an interesting topic right now because we are in such a disruptive period. And, let's face it, we've gone through disruptive periods. You seem to be about my age, so you remember the big data era, the cloud. I thought the cloud was going to take off 10 years before it did. I mean, really, I was surprised at how long it took. And then all of a sudden, bam, it's everywhere. And I joke sometimes that we went from hybrid cloud to multi-cloud in like 2 weeks because people figured out, wait, it's not just on-prem in one cloud, it's on-prem in multiple clouds, right? And there's a bank I interviewed at the Confluent conference, Citizens Bank, in fact, which also was in the Pittsburgh area. And you're a Rust Belt guy like me. And they were bragging about being almost completely in the cloud now. They're like 80%. So that's an interesting trajectory, but it just depends. And I love that you're focused on trying to understand what can we reasonably achieve and bring the team along with us, because no one likes to be told what to do. People do like to collaborate. And so that's your focus, right? Is to understand, all right, what are you trying to do? Are we sure that's the right thing? And then once you decide, okay, now how do we do that, right?
Exactly. How do we do it, and how do we do it at speed? Because one of the things, going back to my comment on strategies of 12 and 24 months, is about as far as you can go.
Right.
So we have to get out of these long 12-month, 24-month delivery cycles that we used to see with technology.
Right.
Because by the time it's implemented, it's old.
Right.
And you can't go back to a CFO and say, hey, we need to do this again.
Right.
Because you just spent millions of dollars on it. You're not going to get that opportunity, right? You have to at least let it live for a certain period of time before you can start to redo it. So we have to figure out, how do we iterate faster?
Yeah.
How do we iterate more intelligently?
Yeah.
For the future. And that's where I think, kind of thinking of mini applications or microservices, for example. How do you do that well so you don't have to touch a large application? You can touch pieces of it in the future to move you forward, versus when we used to build, and some still do build, monolithic applications. Those are hard to change. Because you think about the testing cycles that you have to go through. So how do you take a wealth product or consumer lending as a whole with dozens and dozens of products, but break that down into kind of micro applications, so that way if you want to change mortgage, because that's the biggest lever, you can go touch that without messing with the rest of the ecosystem.
Isn't that beautiful too? I mean, Kubernetes, I remember when Kubernetes came out, and it was actually, I was taking a briefing from MapR, if you remember those guys, and they told me, this is like 2015 maybe, and they were talking about how they were re-architecting their entire platform to run on Kubernetes. I was like, this is a data platform company, and they're refactoring their entire technology stack to run on Kubernetes. This thing is real, and it's going to change how business is done. And it's interesting because it's similar to service-oriented architecture in that you had fine-grained services and coarse-grained services, but it's different. It's a different entity, but still it is so dynamic and flexible, and that's what's beautiful about it, right? Is that you can build components and then reuse them in different areas, and as long as you understand how they all come together, that's a beautiful thing, right?
Yeah, and especially you think about the testing cycles that we used to run. I led core modernization over a decade ago, and I mean, you had 3 months of just nothing but testing.
Right. And that's no fun.
Yeah, and you sit there and say, okay, now that's replacing a core, so sometimes you still might have to do some of that, but you can't do that all the time. You need to get testing down to weeks, if not days.
Right.
And then when you get a change in, you need it to be days or hours.
Right.
So to your point with containerization, how do you almost use the term firewall off the other parts of the architecture? So maybe you have to do some very slim testing over there. But you just mainly are testing the core piece that you changed end to end, because that way you can do that in maybe a matter of a week or less. Right. And the more you automate testing, the more you can run and iterate that. So it's really trying to reduce those cycles. And that's where I think another place where low code comes in. And now eventually kind of the co-pilots, OutSystems was talking about Mentor as their co-pilot. So you take low code, which has already been proven to be faster than high code. Now you add a co-pilot onto it with Gen AI. Now you go from 2 to 3x. Can you get 3, 4, maybe 5x faster? And then once you can iterate, now you start to get changes where you can, again, bringing in, and I always talk in tech, they're like, well, we can do monthly releases. I'm like, okay, but are you going to train 3,000 branch people every month on something new?
Wow.
You might want to do quarterly releases, even though in tech we can go at that speed.
Right.
Bringing the people along again is important. So maybe
Right.
it's build it and stage it in a lower environment, but only once a quarter do we go through training,
Right.
because you have thousands of people to bring along. So you have to pace those two things together.
Yeah.
And coordinate it. It's really important.
Yeah, well, I really like that you appreciate that and understand that the tech can move a certain speed, and there is a sort of impedance mismatch between what the tech can do and what you can train your people to do. And you want to spend the time to train them so they're comfortable. So if they feel confident in what they're doing, that's when it's a win-win for everybody, right?
It is. And when you think about now, all of a sudden we're going to interact with Gen AI. So that could be our contact center people, our branch people, our sales people.
Right.
They're going to get questions, information in a different format than they used to, faster than they used to.
Right.
There's going to be a learning curve there that I don't know if we've completely figured out. I mean, obviously myself and almost everybody else on the planet probably is with Chat GPT or something like
Right.
that, right?
Right.
And even for me, there was a learning curve, right? Of how to prompt, how
Yeah.
to ask it the right question, how
Sure.
to understand and feel confident in the response you're getting.
Sure.
So we're going to have to get our employees comfortable
Yeah.
with that. And we're at as companies also get trust in that it's putting out the right thing. So if we're sending out
Right.
emails or marketing or anything that's external, how do
Right.
we track and kind of oversee that so we have trust that our employees are doing the right thing? And all of a
Right.
sudden, you talk about hallucinations and all those wonderful things, that something didn't go awry.
Right.
And I think of the old days when we used to, this was a long time ago, we helped with pitch books because sometimes the salesperson might go out and they have an outdated
Yeah.
cover letter or something like that. So we created a whole system to try to stop that from happening. This is kind of a new problem of all of a sudden, did it hallucinate or did it just say something slightly wrong that we didn't want to go? So how do we control that as a company?
Right.
And make sure our employees understand that.
Right. Well, the difference between probabilistic and deterministic systems, right? Like that's the keys. I ask people with some of this Gen AI stuff, what part of your business can be wrong 20% of the time? Or if your model is really good,
In a
10%
bank,
of the
zero.
time.
Let me answer that one for you.
Right. Well, exactly. Like in a bank, and that's the mission critical side of your job. So you really do appreciate that. I can
Yeah.
tell, right? And I also like the way you talk about having these teams come in. So you move from one place to another. You got 100 people, so you can probably work on 3, 4, 5 projects at a time. Is that about right?
Correctly. We generally do 5 large projects at a
Okay.
time, and then we might have some smaller underlaying, kind of anywhere from a half dozen to a dozen smaller ones. And within that, I also have an intelligent automation team that kind of what I run, hyper automation. So intelligent OCR, intelligent automation. They also have low code now in there, and we're starting to bring in Gen AI. So sometimes there's more tactical things that we're working on from our backlog that we can kind of set a few engineers off to go fix.
Sure.
And we have a couple process engineers that always just kind of do mapping in that area.
Right.
But then we always have the 5 larger projects.
Yeah, that's very cool. And I like that you understand you don't want to bite off more than you can chew, especially because you're a bank. So it has to be correct. It has to be deterministic. I want my money to be there, right? Regardless.
Exactly.
No hallucinations on the accounting side, right?
Exactly. And when if a regulator comes in or we get audited,
Right.
we need it to pass.
Right.
Right. So it's we think about that. And I've done a lot of work around automating controls and things like that within Key as well. But we have to think about that as we install things.
Right.
And then again, that goes down or comes down to the speed of, okay, we're putting this in. Do we have all the right controls in place
Right.
while we're doing it?
Well,
Let's think about that as part of design.
Right. I spent years in the risk management space, and they talk all about control points. Any point at which a human being can take a decision or a machine can take a decision, and you really need to map those out and understand where they are from an audit perspective, right? Because you need to understand, okay, which control point went off the radar here. And if you have that mapped out, then you're safe. Then you can say, okay, this is it, and what's our remediation path? This is how we do that. So you really have to think through things more so than really, I mean, healthcare obviously is also really important, but these are 2 big industries where you cannot get things wrong.
Exactly. Heavily regulated and for the right reasons.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And so your team, we got about 3 minutes left in this segment. Your team, you've got transformation leaders, you've got process analysts, coders, obviously. Are there other roles, or are those the main roles?
Those are the core roles, and how we expand, because we never look to code everything that we come up with. So we leverage all of Key's technology team. So when we think of a end state design, we go in and I talked a little bit yesterday about this. We don't think the tech into the last third of the design, because we want to understand we have the process.
Right.
right? And process then leads what the people changes. It can then let us look at how do you best tech enable that.
Yeah.
Because often you get siloed and you get that tunnel vision again of, well, I'm already using XYZ system in this area.
Yeah.
So you automatically think, oh, I have to use that.
Yeah.
And as soon as you do that, you're sub-optimizing your creativity, your thought, because it's pieces of the puzzle. There could be 5 different technologies
Right.
that you need to really come together to make that robust. Maybe we have 2 or 3 of them. Maybe we have all 5 within the company. We just never thought of putting them together in that way, in that area.
Yeah.
So that's where it's stepping back and trying to really think broad from an architecture perspective of how do we really solve this? And while it might not be this core system or the second system we have, it could be intelligent automation coming in and doing something, or low code being a wrapper, or Gen AI solving a 20-step process and connecting into the core. So you have to be creative in that way.
Yeah, and you're going to like this. So a friend of mine is a developer, and he has a mantra. He says, busy is the enemy of creative. What do you think about that?
That is an excellent way to say it, right? Because it's kind of just, is it busy work?
Right.
Or are you intelligently moving the company forward?
Right, because you can always do it a better way. I mean, you can always build a better mousetrap.
Exactly, and so that's where I think if you lead with the process, generally you think differently about the tech that's going to enable it, because you're asking different questions.
Right.
When you start with the tech, generally well, here's what the tech can do.
Right.
Well, now I'm trying to get the process to work around that.
Yeah.
Which may and most often is not the best process for our clients.
Right.
And therefore the shareholders, probably the regulators, et cetera.
Right.
So you really have to think about that. And going back to your control piece, how do you watch those kind of human in the loop interactions?
Yeah.
Throughout systems.
Yeah.
Right. And where can you minimize those places so we have more controlled handoff? So if we can get the humans to be more client facing,
right,
higher thinkers, kind of doing the higher end of the workload,
right,
we're in a better place.
Yeah.
Than kind of parsed throughout a multi-step process.
Right.
For example.
That's very cool stuff. And I like that you recognize the need to, again, bring the people along, but also monitor what happens and watch the systems as they do. So you prototype something and you really pay attention. How are people using it? And ask yourself all the hard questions. How can this go wrong? You sort of map out the potential array of developments that could come into play as you're using all these systems. Well, folks, fantastic conversation here. Don't touch that dial. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, ladies and gentlemen, back here on Inside Analysis, and I am just so pleased and excited to be joined here with the CEO and founder of OutSystems, none other than Paulo Rosado. And Paulo, I have to say, your opening for the conference was spectacular. Everyone is an innovator. That's so exciting. I see why people love you and why they get excited to work for you, because it's a beautiful mantra. And the fact is, everyone is an innovator. They just need the right tools, the right opportunity, and the right vision, right?
Correct. No, it's a pleasure to be here with you guys, Eric. This is a great opportunity also for everyone to take advantage of the spirit and the vibe that we have in this conference.
Right.
Which is a very different conference from the typical software vendor
Right.
conference.
Well, I noticed that people come with their stories. They're excited to share what they've done. And what I've learned in life is people love to share their vision, their accomplishments. They want to learn about other people, what they're doing, get that shared experience. And these days with Gen AI and with Mentor, I mean, goodness gracious, talk about a spike in productivity and a disruptive wave, a very positive disruptive wave, but one nonetheless that we have to manage and sort of work through. And I was very, very impressed. I wrote about it today, in fact, that you took a requirements document, loaded it onto the platform, and you have an app. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really amazing. Did you ever think you would see that?
Well, actually, when we started looking into back in 2001, when we started looking into the way enterprises were going about doing their projects and building their internal software,
right?
We always thought this thing is unusual. It shouldn't be this difficult.
Right.
And it's not predictable. It's everything is always over budget. We overpromise, we never deliver. It was always puzzling to me. I actually felt a little bit bad as part of the IT community and the vendor community to not being able to solve a problem that was so pervasive. And so the OutSystems platform was fundamentally almost like a first principle design, a reverse engineering of what would happen if we could automate software the way we automate other things, and
Right.
and actually help developers and business people and managers in a way to be way more productive, to just get digital systems done
Right.
and in time and on budget. And what happened now is with the Gen AI, the productivity factors that we already had in the platform, we just get an extra level, an
Right.
extra multiplier,
Right.
which further allows us to compress not only the build time for these projects, but also the change time.
Well, and you know what really excites me, and this is one of my soapbox issues, is the morale factor. Because when you can get to an MVP quickly, it boosts morale. And you're like, wow, we're really getting somewhere. And people like that. And when you get that energy infused into a project, good things happen. So we're now at a stage where you don't have to go through all this tedious effort to get something go. Okay, there it is. Now it's working. I
correct.
mean, goodness gracious, in minutes, you load this document into the system and you've got an application. Now you have to play around with it, but it caught an error. It caught the error of no rejection and it called it a cancellation. That's impressive.
That's pretty impressive. I think the impact of these technologies in the operation of an IT and the relationship with the wider business and the way fusion teams actually work,
Right.
is that the moment you have a technology that allows you to build really fast and to recover from misconceptions or misunderstandings in terms of requirements,
Sure.
you no longer have the typical game of the IT blaming the business
Right.
because they gave you wrong
Right.
scope.
That's right. Or the
You-
business blaming the IT when it's not
Oh,
right and all
because-
the finger pointing.
Yeah, exactly. Or the business blaming IT because they took too long to do something. The karma changes. And actually that's what we see in our customers, is that there is a positive karma of saying yes.
Nice.
Hey, we can do that, but can you wait 4 weeks?
Right.
Instead of no,
Right.
you have to get online to do this project because we only have availability in 2 years.
Right.
That's a very different, but that's what happens if in a lot of organizations still today,
Right.
and what happened a lot in the past.
Well, and see, the other thing that excites me too is the fluidity of creativity and design. And if you can produce at the speed of ideas, at the speed of human energy, then you're rolling. Because to truncate that, to stop and say, okay, we have to wait 6 weeks or whatever it is, it just kills the initiative. It kills the vibe. And that's not good.
Yeah.
You want to carry that through, that energy someone gets when they have an idea. Aha, I know what I want to build. Let's do this. And you start, and if you're making progress, the momentum continues. And now, I mean, you can just get off to the races just that quickly. And that's really good for morale, right?
And you know what's interesting, Eric, is everyone who comes to an OutSystems conference where we have always these thousands of people, each one of them has probably 5 to even 50 particular type of systems that they built, ideas that were put in practice. Some of them didn't work so well in the beginning, but they kept on iterating. What that does is that it kind of exercises the innovation, the creation muscle, because because there's almost 2 types of innovations. There's the 0 to 1 innovation, where you kind of have to invent something out of a blank canvas.
Right.
And then there is the 1 to N innovation, where you start with something and you iterate. And what we see is that 0 to 1, there's a very small percentage of individuals that can do that. These are the Elon Musks, maybe, and the Steve Jobs, and they are first principle creators of things, or they think like that. Everyone else, 80% plus of the population, is actually the hidden innovator. They just need something to start with.
I like that.
And so if you give them a platform where even when they start is not perfectly correct, they actually can get to that perfect solution by iterating and not getting punished by failure.
That's right.
And so it's an experimentation mechanism that you do in mission critical projects.
Right.
It's a very different way of doing things, but it completely changes the change dynamics and almost the social construct of the organization. We really start to get innovators when you put these technologies in place.
Well, and the creativity comes alive when you can see something quickly. I mean, there in the old days, there's a lot of frustration because you want to solve something, but you have to go through so many steps to get it up and running. And then it's like, oh, thank goodness we got it up and running. And then the next stage, and it just took a long time because the systems weren't that sophisticated yet. But now, to your point, when people see something happening, when they can look at it quickly and go, wow, this is going somewhere,
Yeah,
that's exciting.
that
And
is.
it gets them energized. And I've always believed that when morale is high, good things happen.
Yeah.
When morale is low, you could have all the money, time, and resources in the world, and good things are probably not going to happen because
Yeah.
people are frustrated. And so you're really greasing the tracks to innovation here, right?
Yeah. And the other thing is that in a typical project, if it takes too long and you actually engage with the business, as IT professionals, right? You engage with the business in the beginning of the project and you force them to write
Right.
scopes or requirements or whatever, and
Right.
then you go away
Right.
and you go and build it. And every 3 weeks, if it's an agile project, you come to them and you show them something, or you don't show them something for the first 2 or 3 months
Right.
because you're building foundations and integrations and all of that. What happens with the business is that they forget about you. They don't
Right.
even know you're building something. Because they're not involved, which basically then creates a problem for adoption because
Right.
the system then
Right.
is not their system.
Right.
But now in contrast, if you actually, the first moment you're getting requirements, you're already building something. And that's the power of these local platforms with Gen AI and whatever. The factor of productivity is so high that you actually, the moment you start acquiring requirements, you're already starting showing them
Right.
smaller versions of the app, which are really prototypes, but they are actually really running applications.
Right.
And as you iterate, they kept on telling you, this is wrong, we would like to change that. And you can absorb those changes.
Right.
They never leave.
Right.
They every week they come to you and say, well, how much? How fast did you go? What
Right.
did you add?
Wow.
And then you show them and say, oh, you guys already did this. And
Wow.
so they kept on being involved, which basically means that when you go into adoption mode, and sometimes you have to launch it in 80,000 users or a portal for 5 million, and you have to have the teams, the marketing teams, the HR teams, the organizational teams, the operations teams involved into selling the new solution, the new process, the new way of working to the
Right.
organization.
Right.
If they were involved,
Right.
they are going to defend that.
That's right. That's right. They're skin in the game.
They have skin in the
As-
game, and it's no longer an IT project.
Right.
It's
a business project.
It's a business
A
project.
business solution being designed in front of their eyes. You know, it reminds me of when you go to a fairground somewhere, to Walt Disney World, and you have the artist who will sit there and draw you like right in front of you. You can watch it happening. And when you watch it, it's like, wow, look how quickly they're building this. And you feel like you're part of it.
Yeah,
And
correct.
that's the key to adoption, because to your point, we spend all this time and effort building solutions, and then if people don't use it, how depressing is that? Right? That's just no fun at all. And it's not good for the business. So to have this interaction where you're collaborating in real time and showing results right out of the gate, it's just wonderful for engagement and involvement and business support. So they'll do something the next time you want to do something
Yeah.
too, right?
It's so good in so many areas because, I mean, one of the things that really pumps everyone at OutSystems is the fact that our community, our customers, and it's a very, very wide and large community. We've seen these people sometimes when we engage for the first time. We sold the first version of the first platform. They start doing the first project.
Right.
And we see a lot of these, especially IT personnel. I mean, these guys are overworked. They're stressed.
Right.
A lot of they maintain a lot of legacy systems that are
Right.
frozen for 20 years,
Right.
and they have to say no to a lot of stuff, and that hits you up,
Right.
right? The fact that as you want to please, you want to provide value, but you're constrained by the technology that you have,
Right.
and suddenly this type of platform appears, and suddenly you start saying yes, and we see a dramatic change in almost the way you look at your job.
Wow.
Okay, so it starts with IT, and then as we get this business involved, then we see this extension to the business folks that start looking at technology, complex technology like portals, like IoT, like face recognition,
Right.
like Gen AI, like utilization of agents. They start see that as a normal thing that they can point and ask for something, and suddenly they feel like they are tech innovators also.
Right.
And so you get the IT guys to become like really proud servers
Right.
of the business, and the business to feel like they are tech innovators.
Right.
And you get like this vibe between the full community. And we see we're not into change management or whatever. We're simply platform provider. But the fact of the matter is that it creates a catalyst in the vibe and the psyche
Right.
of the workforce that we've never seen before. And that's why I think this is why we keep on doing this job for such a long time and innovating on top of innovation.
That's great. Well, I've thought a long time about morale and why morale goes down. And what I've determined is there are friction points. And the friction points could be you don't feel like you're being heard, or you don't have the tools to get the job done, or you are encountering static from people who don't understand what you're trying to explain. And almost all of that goes away when you enter this world of rapid development.
Correct.
Because you are being heard. You can see the results of having been heard. The friction points go away, and that's when you grease the tracks, and that's when everything starts rolling, and that feeds itself. So people start getting more ideas, and they start getting more engaged, and that's what you want in the organization. Business and IT should not be two separate silos. They need to be collaborators around building the infrastructure of the business, right?
Yeah. No, we're really reaching that stage where if you actually take the time to create a platform that, for the most part, is made out of components that are extremely flexible,
right,
and fast changing. And a lot of those components, like application, service, workflows, agents, they're part of this ecosystem of apps. If you have that, you get rid of the sprawl of SaaS that's dragging you down, or
interesting,
or if you manage to curb like big legacy systems that have tons of backlogs still hanging on them, because and you cannot move forward. If you get rid of that, and we have seen organizations just taking like these legacies and deciding it's so fast now to rewrite something. We're going to rewrite 80% of them anyway.
Wow.
And just leave a small piece that doesn't change there. You now have the possibility of actually upgrading this lattice, this ecosystem
wow,
of applications to these things that are so agile that you're now ready for anything that comes.
Wow.
And that's when we see a level of competitive advantage when the CEO comes and says, I want to start a new product line, or I need to catch up for a newcomer.
Yeah,
And
it
actually,
opens the door.
It opens, I mean, you get that capability where the combination of IT with the business, they just say, let's go forward. And in 3 months, they become competitive.
That's amazing. Well, folks, don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis. All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis, your host, Eric Cavanaugh, with Paulo Rosado, the founder and CEO of OutSystems. They have a low-code development platform. They've been building solutions for 23 years and counting. But I feel like, Paulo, this really is an inflection point, and AI is a huge part of that. Gen AI, of course, is just one flavor of AI, and AI agents, which are fascinating little creatures out there that can do very specific things. And what I've been hearing from a lot of industry titans and visionaries is AI agents should focus on a particular thing that they do very, very well, like checking a system, vetting a system, giving some feedback on something. Tell us how AI agents are part of your vision going forward.
Well, so we have a low-code platform that fundamentally supports the full life cycle of building software.
Mm-hmm.
So over the past 20 plus years, we've started looking into the anatomy of these applications. These applications are made out of front ends. Several years ago, we added to the web, we added mobile with the emergency of the iPhone, and bring your own device. It's made out of workflows. It's made out of integrations. It's made out of repositories. This is where you put data.
Mm-hmm.
It's made out of business rules. These were the typical type of apps. Either you had applications, or you had applications that had no front ends, that had
Right.
APIs. We call them services.
Right.
And that was the anatomy of the systems
Interesting.
that we actually had in an organization. And when you build a solution, you build a solution out of these 6 concepts,
Right.
really. What GenAI brought is the addition of a 7th concept to the ecosystem of applications that you have. And that's the way we see it. Because what an agent does is, from a very generic LLM, with techniques like RAG, where you actually add some form of a content stack, you vectorize it, you ground it, you do a bunch of these techniques, you actually can then build an extremely customized piece, almost like an intelligent digital construct that you can now attach to a workflow, so that instead of you deciding what is the routing rules or whatever, now the agent actually does that for you. Or you put it in front of a data entry process where, instead of having 50 people reading documents and typing things into forms, you now have something that increasingly sucks in all this unstructured data, transforms it into structured data, and validates it, and then puts it into the database immediately. And so what we see is that if you are trying to look into and trying to reorganize a process, there's a particular way for you, at least for now, if you're starting to use agents, if you're starting to use GenAI, to actually look into the process or the journeys, and you see, this thing here, which was a human task or something that I actually had a bit of toil or boring work, I actually can remove that and put this piece here. But what we found is that agents need to access data across the organization. And so they need integrations with, they need to access other systems. They actually can be built inside workflows. And so workflows are there, and they kind of mesh with the agents. They can change. You still need interfaces. The interfaces, however, can be helped by agents, or they can be front ends for some agents, for back offices and whatever. And so what we found is that in the end, all these concepts that we already kind of automated and speed up when we build these applications, they're still there. But if you add agents, you can actually build smarter type of apps. You can build systems where integrations and automations are now smarter. And so it's a very evolutionary type of approach, and one that I think gives a pass for a lot of organizations. So instead of just building another chatbot, which is what most are doing, is actually looking into a lot of processes. If you're in insurance underwriting, claims processing, if you are in banks, treasury, credit, loans origination, portals, onboarding, customer onboarding, and you see almost everywhere in the middle of the process, in the middle of the journey, you see opportunities to plug in one of these narrow agents or more broader agents. But still, the agents, then, when you build them, when you build the way you operate, the way you update them, they actually need to be meshed with the app, the training and the cycle of the agent. Like, how do I retrain it? How do I validate it? How do I make sure it doesn't access data that it shouldn't, because the person who's asking doesn't have access to that data? How does it do retrieval that is secure? How does it contact the outside? All of those things are already constructs that are in standard applications we have in the enterprise. So this is really good news for people that think, oh, this is going to build completely different systems. No, it's going to look like completely different systems, but it's going to be built using the artifacts that we have owned and invested on in the past years.
Well, and they can do all sorts of things, checks and balances. Think like compliance. So one of the more interesting use cases I've heard about are in certain industries with call centers, the the person for the company has to mention something within the first 60 seconds, like, hello, my name is so-and-so, and I'm here to help you. And they're supposed to read certain things. Well, one of these little agents can just sit there and monitor that all day long and not get bored. If a person has to do that all day long, they get bored, they make mistakes. These agents don't get bored. They just do what they're supposed to do. And so you just plant them wherever you need them, and they're constant little feedback generators for you, right?
Yeah. I mean, using agents, for instance, in support, in ticket workflows, or replacing even those processes, is something that's now it's fairly used. But I'll give you an example. Every day, as we talk with our customers and they experimenting with our platform and our agent builder, which we now have introduced in the platform,
Right.
they come back with patterns that I've never saw.
Wow.
Let me give you one that I just got surprised. I was like, wow. And so a lot of the sales processes, the sales journeys for sales are dramatically changing.
Yeah.
I mean, we used to do things in a way that we're now realizing was pretty cumbersome.
Right.
Okay. And we're changing them where these agents, these interfaces are becoming much smarter in terms of helping the salesperson becoming more effective and actually addressing the buying journey of the customer.
Right.
But one of the things that I find absolutely fascinating is one of the big problems, for instance, with sales is ramp time.
Yeah.
Ramp time of salespeople.
Right.
Okay. And so depending on the organization, it might take you 3 months for you to be completely trained. If the product is relatively simple, it might take you 6 months to be completely trained. If it's 9, it's probably you shouldn't sell that thing anyway.
Right.
But with this type of technologies, what we've seen is, what if we give a very small training, but then on the field, in transaction, just have an agent kind of tell you, hey, if you need to provide some references, these are the ones that are perfect for this guy.
Right.
Okay. And then what's interesting is that we starting seeing these custom agents. Some of our customers are putting there and saying, the reason why I'm advising these reference cases is because of this.
Right.
And they have a why explanation. And I was like, why did you guys put the why here?
Right.
And what they said is, well, this is a way for us to train the juniors.
Right.
Because we give them advice, but instead of treating them like people that cannot learn, we actually have the agent, which already reflects a lot of the experience of the seniors,
Right.
act as a just-in-time trainer.
Wow.
And so this is just a pattern. I can give you another 100 patterns like this.
Right.
That as you experiment with this technology, you start learning about it and you iterate.
Isn't that cool?
We are really in the innings of this.
Yeah,
I tell you, Eric.
I think that's exactly right. And when you see it, when you use it, because this is a new tool and it's a very adaptable, agile, interesting and curious little tool, because to your point, you'll see new patterns that you haven't seen before that gives you new ideas. And I really like that you mentioned this just-in-time agent, and we'll, I think, dig deeper into that in the podcast bonus segment here in just a second. But I have this theory, and it seems to be proving out that the way AI will manifest its value will largely take the form of suggestions. So you're doing something you already do, and it comes along and goes, hey, have you thought about doing this? Have you thought about doing that? I saw that in Gmail a couple of years ago, where all of a sudden, if you're in Gmail itself on Google, it'll say, oh, you haven't followed up on these emails. Do you want to follow up on them? And I'll be like, wow, I do. That's pretty interesting. These are important prospects for me, so I will follow up on that. But folks, don't touch that dial. Podcast bonus segment is coming up next, right here on Inside Analysis. All right, folks, time for the podcast bonus segment here on Inside Analysis with Paulo Rosado, the founder and CEO of OutSystems. We're here in Amsterdam at the One Conference. And Paulo, I think we're all excited about AI agents. What can they do? Big question you just mentioned in the break there. Can they be bought off the shelf, or do you have to build them yourself? And my guess is that you can have some basic agents that grab data, for example, or vet code. I mean, there are all kinds of things that you can do. We talked earlier about how the system in the demo yesterday found a mistake and a rather significant omission in the requirements document and just filled it in for you.
Yeah.
That's impressive when you can see when it, because I've noticed this, AI is very good. Like if you look at the Gen AI stuff, it's really good at summarizing things. And it's also very good at catching little things that you would miss because humans make mistakes. We get distracted, we forget about things, and instead of go, oh, don't forget to put the security framework in place. So what do you think? Can they be pre-built or at least templates, or what are your thoughts on that?
It's a we've been having a lot of thoughts about how much do you have to customize these agents?
Right.
How much can you get them off the shelf? And it's really a question of where is the intellectual property of these things?
Oh,
And
interesting.
part of that intellectual property is actually in the prompting and in the
Yeah.
way you organize the content stacks,
Sure.
especially if we look into RAG techniques and the likes. What we find, though, is that even if you start with a collection of prompts that are already optimized for the particular usage
Right.
of the agent, the fact is, as we evolve, we start having people saying, oh, we should actually augment a static content stack with some Q&A, for instance, with some access to data.
Right.
Oh, we should get that. That will give more context and more insight. And what we see is that it's difficult for you to buy something off the shelf that already has the plugins, the right pieces where you can go and integrate with other sources
Right.
and iterate on those sources.
Right.
And we find also that at a certain point, you start wanting to kind of tune the way the prompts are written. And so we as we start with some templates and whatever, and we measure, okay, do you want to change this? We realize that after we start getting a certain level of sophistication, you immediately go and you start evolving these agents to become really things that connect almost everywhere.
Wow.
The access integrations. Then sometimes you put them like a screen that removes the conversational interface, which is really, in a lot of cases, is very inadequate. And you put like a form on top that's much easier, has much less friction. And after a while, you have a very custom app that you're constantly shifting, changing, and adjusting.
Right.
So we see, in a lot of our customers today, we see very little pre-built agents.
Interesting.
And we see a lot of templates and organizations that come with agents, and then they do a lot of work with the company. And that, for us, is where all software is going. And we see also that a lot of agents are going there, which is it's really you controlling the life cycle of these things.
Right. And we got about 4 minutes left here. So I'm going to throw my latest theory at you. I've been thinking and writing about new IT versus old IT. And old IT, I think, is imperative programming. It's very manual in nature. It's sort of inside out. Let's sit down and build something out. And then people have to go fill things out and do things very manually to kind of climb the mountain. New IT is more outside in. It's more declarative. It's grabbing what's already out there, what's already happening, and using that to shape an engine to do better things with business. What do you think about that?
I think you're perfectly right. I think most of the transformations we already seen, even before AI, are really around trying to become more outside in.
Right.
If you are an IT, is actually involving the business.
Right.
If you're a business, is actually involving your customers and partners.
Right.
It's starting from the customer journey or the buying journey on the onboarding processes or whatever.
Right.
So I think those organizations that manage to change the culture and focus on that, actually building stuff that's useful and putting the metrics and all of that and transforming that into kind of having that reflect into the digital systems are the organizations that we see growing and winning.
Well, it's like in a lot of cases, we try to superimpose a structure on the world instead of taking a step back and looking at how the world is actually working and then building systems that go with the flow, essentially. And I think that's where we are today is, hey, like, for example, pulling comments from a Slack channel or from a social channel or from your email. And that's the other interesting thing is piggybacking on top of existing systems. So I don't have to go from this system to that system to some other system. In my world where I do my work, I'll have the little recommendations coming in from the AI. Hey, you should mention this. You should do that. Don't forget about this. That I think is really respectful of the user, of the individual worker, and that's going to be good for the whole. What do you think?
I think you're perfectly right. I mean, if you look into the good old days where you start having highly prescriptive processes,
Right.
because you had the world 50 years ago, you had a world that changed very slowly.
Right.
You could establish a process, that process would work.
That's funny.
When that process starts fighting with a fast-changing world,
Right.
a lot of that process became bureaucracy.
Right.
Because now you want to do things a little bit different, and the process is sticking you, is constraining you. That's why a lot of when you reflect those processes into digital systems, it immediately appears the need for the digital systems to be changed very fast.
Wow.
What I think you're talking about is the next generation of flexibility,
Right.
which is I don't even do any type of prescription.
Right.
In this piece of the workflow, I'm just going to put an agent.
Right.
And whenever things change, I'm going to retrain the agent, or I'm going to let the agent adapt. There's a little bit of side effects to that.
Right.
Is that lack of non-determinism.
Right.
It's going to create a certain level of, I don't know what this guy is going to do here.
Right.
Okay.
A certain uncertainty.
That's going to be very, very scary for certain cultures that are very industrial, that are very process oriented. And so I think there is a middle ground there.
Right.
But you're absolutely right. It's an adaptation between flexibility and structure.
And that's what human beings do. That's what we do naturally when we don't have to be constrained by a system. That's how we naturally evolve. You can get immediate feedback and change your mind and go in a different direction. That's why I love conversations, because you can figure out if someone is really with you or not, and then adjust in real time. We want systems to do the same thing. Well, folks, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to Paulo Rosado and the whole team here at OutSystems. I have to say, very professional outfit, doing good things. The vibe is very, very positive. Hop online to check out more about them. OutSystems is the name of the company. Paulo Rosado and lots of other people you should look up. Good stuff. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Edgar.
Talk to you next time, folks. Send me an email, info@InsideAnalysis.com. Talk to you next time. Bye-bye.